Well, good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to our webinar this afternoon on your communication and social media. My name is Florence Milliken, and I'll be taking you through our topic today. Now, I wonder, have you ever had a social media oops moment where you've maybe been sending a text message to the wrong group, or maybe you've shared a photo to your public account instead of your friend's account? I wonder, did you hear about Mark Ruffalo? He famously did an Instagram live from a premiere, but he forgot to end the stream, and it accidentally leaked the first 10 minutes of the movie from his pocket. And then I recently heard about an HP who, upon receiving a general Christmas message from the CEO in his Christmas jumper, this girl intended to send her thoughts on what a prat he looked to her close friends, but accidentally replied to all. So several hundred employees, including the CEO, heard all about it. And of course, she did have to apologise, and she had to write up a reflection on what happened afterwards. But I think it's that potential to reach many people with our thoughts is one of the key reasons that we want to talk about it today with you. When you think about it, there's over 4.5 billion people using social media worldwide, so mistakes are going to happen. So I think as healthcare professionals, with that reputation of our professions at stake, we really want to do what we can to mitigate against any sort of risk like that there. However, at the outset, I do want to clarify, we do know most registrants do use social media very responsibly. So this may well just be reassurance for you, maybe as I remind you about our standards, and we'll look at some of the opportunities and the challenges of using social media. And I'll do that using some case studies, which are based on scenarios that we would see. And that includes some information around freedom of expression and what our professional responsibility is. So our session will be no more than 45 minutes long. And with the large numbers that we have, microphones and cameras are turned off, as would be normal. Our Q&A is open there, but really just for comments today. We don't issue certificates for our events, but there will be opportunities for you to reflect throughout the session. So I would recommend that you do that, maybe get a piece of paper and just write a few comments along. And I will stop and pause just for moments of reflection for you to write something up. And then, of course, you can write that up afterwards, and that will count towards your CPD. You'll also get a follow-up email after the event, and that will include the slides, a recording of the session, and some useful resources to you, or for you, sorry. And I'm going to use Slido here very, very shortly as well. So you might want to get your phones out for that. Now, since we are doing this as part of CPD Week, just a quick reminder, if you need it, that we are the regulator for 15 health and care professions with the primary purpose of protecting the public. So part of that is making sure that your knowledge and your skills are up to date. And that's why you must continue your professional development throughout your career. So that CPD that you do, it should be relevant to your role, and it should be benefiting both your practice and your service users. And that's what our CPD standards say. So of course, today is a good example of you doing this. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope you find it very useful. Now, before we start, and really just to check that it's all running okay, can you all please let us know really how you would maybe currently rate what your knowledge and your understanding of our topic is today around social media. So if you can get your phones and get onto the QR code and just have a vote, just let us know what you would rate. It's how you rate your own knowledge and your understanding already. So I can see we've got a bit of variety going on here. There's some of you right up at 5. So that's thank you so much for joining, and you'll maybe be able to share the end whenever you fill in your survey if there's anything that we've missed out that you think we should also add in. But thank you for joining. A lot of you in the middle there, nearly half of you in the middle. So that's, I suppose, what we usually expect in our topic. So that's really helpful. I am going to be asking the same question towards the end. Again, I want to just pause a little bit just to get as many people as possible answering. We've got up to 200 people answering already, so that is super. That's great. Right, I'm going to go on here now and just bear that all in mind, and we'll ask that again towards the end. So just starting off with a little bit of introduction about social media and freedom of speech here. So another quick question for you. Which of the following would you say are social media platforms? So look very carefully at them all and just let me know which of the following are social media platforms. Oh, I wonder, did I tick that you can tick more than one? I may not have done that, but I can see most of you are saying all of the above. Yeah. Okay. And the real reason why I did ask that question was because of the likes of WhatsApp there. I think, when we're talking about social media, we are referring to really any website or application that allows you to create and share content and to interact with other users through various forms of digital communication that we use nowadays, text messages, images, videos, and audio. And I think X and Facebook or Instagram, they're probably quite obvious to us, so that's what we're talking about. But sometimes we forget WhatsApp would be included in there as well. So with everything we're talking about today, remember it includes the likes of WhatsApp as well. Now, we do know that many of you use social media in a professional capacity, maybe as part of CPD. I've done it myself in the past, like developing and sharing your skills and your knowledge, following researchers, maybe getting alerts to new articles that are coming out, or being a part of communities of practice. These are really rich sources of CPD for you, and they're usually done on social media platforms. And of course, the benefit of the likes of that is you can network right across the world, other than just in your own localities or your own professions. And of course, you might be using social media as well to help the public to understand what you do and to raise the profile of your profession. So I think it's important just to say that we at the HCPC do recognise the many positives of using social media, and we certainly don't advise not to use it at all. But as with many opportunities for use, there comes with it opportunities for misuse. And that can be both deliberate or inadvertent. So it's important, I think, that we do what we can to mitigate against that risk. So this is just a moment to reflect. And if you have a piece of paper in front of you, jot a few things down here, and it just helps you to reflect and engage, I think, in the session and make it applicable to yourself. So just take a moment and just reflect or write down maybe what are some of the different ways that you use social media, and think particularly the ways that social media has benefited you professionally. And then if you're thinking about those ways that you're using it, you'll be able to apply then what we're talking about later on. So think about that, jot that down. And maybe at the same time, reflect on any concerns that you have already with how you're using social media. Obviously, I hope that I'll be able to answer a lot of those questions or those reflections as we go through. But if there's anything then that is still remaining for you that you're not sure about, please fill in the questionnaire at the end and ask us those questions. That would be really helpful for us. So how about we think about any concerns you have? I certainly know one of the challenges in using social media is just getting that balance right between freedom of speech and of expression with public and reputational protection. So our law tells us that freedom of expression is a qualified right. So in other words, registrants are free to hold and express protected beliefs. So for example, religious beliefs, ethical beliefs, and political beliefs. And it isn't just limited to inoffensive beliefs as well. It can be irritating and contentious and even provocative beliefs. However, that right can be limited if what we're communicating affects either public safety or confidence in the profession or our professional standards. So as registrants, we do have to consider whether what we're expressing crosses the line from legitimate personal expression into conduct that actually raises fundamental concerns about professionalism or fitness to practice. And I think it's worth remembering as well that as healthcare professionals, what we say carries weight, and we must be held to our standards. And I think it's when you consider the widespread use of social media in today's world that really helps us, I think, to appreciate that we must be mindful of what messages we are sending out. So we're going to take a brief look at how the standards link to how you use social media. Now remember, it doesn't have to be just standards that have the word social media in it. Many of our other standards, general standards, will link into how we use social media. They're all available on our website. So I won't be reading them out word for word, you'll be glad to hear. But this could definitely be something that you might want to go back, maybe follow up with others, just as a follow-up for you for today. So you can see here, our standards are always set in a way that gives you the freedom to apply them in your context using your professional judgment. And this standard here says that you must ensure that your personal values, beliefs, or biases do not result in discrimination or negatively affect the care and the services that you're providing to service users, carers, or colleagues. And that could actually be relevant when you are using a personal account as well as a professional one, and we'll see that a little bit later on. And social media can blur the boundaries between your personal and professional life, but this standard states, as you can see here, you must set and maintain clear professional boundaries, communicate appropriately, and ensure personal relationships do not influence professional decisions. So you must never abuse your position to pursue personal, sexual, emotional, or financial relationships with service users, carers, or colleagues. So you might decide to set up a separate professional account for communicating with the public. And if a service user was to contact you through a personal account, well, we would recommend that you politely decline, for example, friend requests, and direct them to a professional account if you have one. And you must also use social media responsibly by sharing accurate, non-misleading information. There's that maintaining professional boundaries again, and protecting the privacy and the confidentiality of service users and carers. So that's checking that the information originates from people or organisations that are trustworthy. And if you are engaging in online debates, just making sure that your views are evidence-based and that they are accurate to the best of your knowledge as well. And then similarly, you must behave in a way that upholds public trust and confidence in your profession. You can see here, ensuring any promotional activities that you're involved in are truthful, accurate, and not misleading. And you may choose to include a disclaimer on your profile that your views are your own and that they do not represent the views of your employer or anyone who contracts your services. And it's also worth saying that you should be aware that any historical social media activity can also be considered against our standards. So even if you weren't registered as a professional at the time of that social media activity, so if that was to happen, I think it would be a good idea just to take action maybe and review any old posts and remove any historical social media accounts or posts that maybe would not meet the standards. And then finally, this standard here speaks for itself, I think, about the need for confidentiality. I mean, most people know not to share details about a service user's personal life, their health or their circumstances, or even images relating to the care. But you must also think about jigsaw disclosure. And that's just where seemingly innocuous pieces of information, when they're put together and combined, can actually reveal somebody's identity. Now, it's just a bit of a silly example, really. If I decided, after reading a blog and a magazine, that fresh fruit and vegetables were evil and bad for you, the law could be said to protect my right to believe and share that view, no matter how contrary it is to the best evidence. However, as a healthcare professional, I am held to a higher standard of accountability. So as this view clearly goes against best evidence available and the majority of authoritative advice, let's be honest, it could be seen as harmful if I was to promote this on social media without acknowledging that it is my personal opinion and not necessarily backed by the evidence. And of course, this could be seen as having the potential to put the public at risk and potentially harm the reputation of the profession that I would be representing. Another example could be is if a registrant might attend a lawful protest opposing the use of oil without questions arising as to their fitness to practice. However, if they engaged in criminal activity at the protest, this may mean their fitness to practice could be impaired. Or they may discuss their religious beliefs in a very emotive way, again, protected in law. But if they were to use racist or homophobic, sexist, or other discriminatory language, or even suggest that they would discriminate against others as a result of these views in their professional context, well, then their behaviour would need to be challenged and addressed. Now, it's an important caveat just to add in there, this doesn't relate to whistleblowing or raising concerns, where the need to raise a concern about safety would trump any risk to reputational harm for a service or for an individual. So it's just worth bearing that in mind as well. So we're going to cover 4 case scenarios here They are fictional, but they do accurately reflect the type of concerns that are raised with us at the HCPC. Now, when we're looking at these here, I thought it'd be useful just to put up that these are the things that we would consider. And I thought it might be helpful if you jotted these things down and thought about them yourself as we talk through these scenarios. So we would be making these considerations if a concern came into us. So we would be thinking about, well, have the standards been breached? What has been communicated, or maybe what hasn't been communicated? What was the context? Who was involved? And then, has there been a link made with their professional status or their practice? Is there an attitude coming out here that's maybe posing a risk to the public? Could their behaviours actually cause physical, emotional, or reputational harm? And then now we might only see this sometime after, but is there any evidence of repetition of this behaviour or a pattern of the behaviour? And has there been any insight or remediation? As always, if registrants do breach standards in any particular way, but they show genuine remorse and insight afterwards, well, that indicates to us that there is less risk of future harm to the public, and we would be taking that into consideration if investigating a case. So let's take a look at these case studies. And we're going to start with John D here. He's a paramedic who's not on good terms with several members of the team that he now works in. And after a bad shift, he has taken to social media to express his frustrations, complaining to his friends and to his family. And we know that can happen quite often. And this has included posting inappropriate comments about his colleagues. Now, his posts do not attempt to hide who he is or who his colleagues are, and he makes direct references to his employer. The post makes frustrations plain, and at times he does use derogatory and abusive language about his colleagues. I've left you there to read it for yourselves. Now, his social media profile is publicly available, and a number of his colleagues have actually got mutual connections with him on social media. So it would be easy for them to access the posts, even if they were on a private account. And that's what's happened. So a colleague, Karen, has seen his posts, and she has responded by approaching him directly. As worth pointing out there, she is actually fulfilling her obligation as a registrant, which you all have, that if you see an abusive behaviour, that it's important to raise a concern. And she is raising the concern quite rightly with him. So she's challenging him and says that she feels that the post is inappropriate and it really should be taken down. Now, this is the key moment for John D. So he has been challenged with some genuine and respectfully given feedback. How he responds will set the tone for what will follow. So will he pause before hitting send? That is the big question. Well, no, he doesn't. And John D responds by tagging the colleague in his posts and using derogatory language about her. So Karen has to refer the matter to their mutual line manager. And unfortunately, John D has actually since received some complaints for some of his service users who have searched his name online and found his posts. So Karen's concerned that as a result of these posts, she has lost the trust of her service users as well. But John D asserts, well, this is a personal matter and he has a right to express himself and his feelings, and it's unrelated to his actual clinical practice. Is he right? What do you think? Well, even if this is far removed from a registrant's professional practice, their conduct has the potential to damage public confidence or the perception of the profession. Professional standards require a measure of personal responsibility to be taken to conform to the ethos of your profession, and for an awareness that your personal conduct in public, whether or not it's in a work-related environment or not, can have an impact on the perception of the profession. I always say to the students, once that professional hat goes on, it stays on. And as registrants, you have an overriding obligation to do nothing which might affect the trust the public has in the profession. So really the question for the manager here is, has John D damaged just his own reputation, or actually that of his organisation and that of his profession? And the manager thinks he has, and considers that this could be a disciplinary matter, and follows this up with a full investigation, and is also considering a referral to the HCPC. Why that? Well, the concerns are it's publicly visible, it's abusive, So it may damage public confidence, as I said. It undermines professionalism and respect. And okay, it may have no direct harm to a patient, but I'm sure you're all aware of that link between incivility and patient outcomes. And if you're not, please take a look at the website Civility Saves Lives. It's fascinating information in there. For example, if somebody is even mildly rude to you, your cognitive function can decline by 61%. So put that in a clinical context and you can see how patient outcomes can be affected. So Johnny's attitude towards the feedback is also a bit concerning. And if this is repeated or linked to bullying, that would need to be addressed formally. The same issue, I don't know if you follow any of the medical dramas recently, but the same issue came up. I saw a colleague warning somebody about blurring their professional boundaries with the patient, and they were texting them regularly forward and back on their personal account. And the response that was given when he was challenged about it was to dismiss it. And yet her words were very wisely spoken. When he did all this, I'm sure whatever his intent was in making these posts, he never was thinking that he would end up being investigated and potentially referred to the regulator. So I do think that this really does highlight the importance of thinking before we post and thinking what could happen further down the line, especially when we're angry and upset, and really making sure what we're posting is accurate and it's polite and it's respectful. So just take a moment to reflect. Have you ever considered that what you post on social media could actually be considered unprofessional, even if that's not directly related to your work? Have a moment and think, did you ever consider that? And linked again to that case study, I wonder, how do you respond to feedback? It's a fascinating topic for me. I love talking about feedback and how we receive feedback. Is it determined simply by how much you like the person who's given it to you? Or maybe what mood you're in? Or even how it makes you feel? Or can you at least appraise the feedback you get, even if it's at a time you don't want to hear it or from somebody you don't want to listen to? Because quite often they're the ones that'll give you the most accurate feedback. Okay, so we're going to move on to a second one, and this is Bella. Bella's a physiotherapist who's working in a fracture clinic and has started using Facebook while she's at work. And primarily she's been posting photos of herself and her colleagues on duty in a clinical setting. But in some instances, she has posted about patient injuries and occasionally shared photos of their x-rays. And let's face it, some x-rays of really bad injuries can feel really eye-catching and feel really worthy of a share at times. Now, these posts do not show the face of the patient, but there is otherwise no attempt to hide their identity. And several of the posts contain confidential patient information, despite this not being the focus of the images. Typically, this sort of information is in the background of the photo, but sometimes it includes their names, you can see here, and date of birth. And her posts are also geotagged, which means they identify the location in which they were taken. So in this instance, they can see the hospital in which she works. Now, she believes she's only sharing these images with friends on social media and doesn't believe that they pose a risk to her patient's confidentiality. However, her privacy settings are set to public, so it means all her posts are publicly available. But of course, even if the settings were private, this is still a breach of confidential information. And experience tells us at the HCPC there is never any guarantee for information not getting out. So eventually, a mutual friend of Bella's, Chris, sees one of her posts of an x-ray and believes this might be one of his co-workers. Chris tags his co-worker in a comment and asks, "Is this x-ray yours?" And he is unwittingly also forwarding on the confidential data contained within the post. So the co-worker sees the post of his x-ray and he considers this to be a breach of his confidentiality. His data is publicly available, it's on the internet, and the nature of injury, which was something he was wanting to keep private, was there as well. And many of his colleagues are seeing it and have been making comments about it as well. So he makes a formal complaint to the HCPC. So despite no intention on Bella's part to breach patient confidentiality, HCPC are obviously very concerned about the inappropriate nature of her posts and open an investigation. Now, this might seem like an obvious case, but sometimes registrants do reveal identity and sensitive information by mistake through what we said earlier, jigsaw disclosure. which is where the identities of the patients are pieced together just through bits and pieces of information that you have in front of you. So, for example, in a small community, everyone has heard about the terrible accident that happened today. Then they saw the post of the terrible x-ray taken in the local hospital, and it's not too hard to piece two and two together and know who this is. So we have to be really careful about the specific details that we might be putting on social media. And this is our third one. Ruth. Ruth is a biomedical scientist. She's just heard the figures of how much money was spent in her local area on same-sex couples seeking to access IVF on the NHS. So she has posted the comment, "I don't agree with spending NHS money on people like that." So take a moment and reflect on it. If you were Ruth's manager, what, if anything, would you say? Do you need to say anything to her? Or is she entitled to have those opinions and post them on Facebook or wherever? Well, the important thing here is to remember the protected belief alone is not misconduct. Some registrants may disagree with gay marriage, for example. That's a personal view, which a registrant is entitled to hold. However, her wording here implies discriminatory treatment when she says people like that. And her posting is in the public domain, and she is identifiable as a registrant from her background information, and from her uniform you can see there in her profile picture as well. Now, even if discriminatory language wasn't used, there's additional factors that need to be considered here. If there is a direct link here to her professional role, so for example, does she work in an IVF clinic? And therefore, is there a potential discrimination in practice and a risk to public confidence? Now, maybe she can hold that view, work in the clinic, and there are no breaches in practice or communication or social media policies, and therefore doesn't pose a risk to the public. So it's just worth remembering the belief alone is not the misconduct, but it's the language used around it that could be. And then our final case study, we have Steve. Steve is a dietitian who works for himself. He has been using social media to improve his outreach and to engage with groups that he wouldn't have traditionally reached through his practice. And he posts general information relating to his practice. He's targeting areas of interest to his service users as he does so. And this includes facts and mythbusters relating to nutrition and generalised advice. And he's advertising services and he's sharing articles relating to new research. And he's checked the information in his posts against his professional knowledge and his current knowledge of where the evidence lies as well. And he also ensures that any links that he's providing to his service users point to reputable sources of information and advice. So of course, this is a fantastic way to use his knowledge and his expertise to reach a wider audience, and he's expanding his network and his circle of influence, and also potentially advertising his services, and at the same time providing useful public health information. So we thought it'd be helpful just to end with a more positive note and something that I know many of you probably already do. So hopefully you find those case studies helpful, interesting, maybe a bit insightful in unpacking some of the concepts and the ideas that we have discussed there in the standards. And I'm going to just add on now some maybe more practical tips of how you can use social media. And I'm going to do my own Mythbusters. And I was actually thinking that maybe what you could actually do is, I'm sure not all your colleagues are on this call. If you have colleagues, why don't you take some of these statements here, throw them out to your colleagues and just say, right, let's discuss this. So take a few notes of what we say about these here things and discuss it in more detail with your colleagues. So the first one there is you cannot say anything these days without someone getting offended. So while it's true, of course, sensitivity does vary, and offence can sometimes be taken regardless of what the intention is, but we still have a responsibility to communicate respectfully, especially when representing yourself and your organisation and your profession. So remember the power imbalance that we have with our patients. Our words and actions can really influence their behaviour and their trust and our professional reputation, and even public health outcomes as well. So it's not just about avoiding giving offence, but it's also about upholding the integrity and the trustworthiness of the profession. And even if you're challenging somebody or something that you think is wrong, or you're expressing a controversial or an unpopular view, that is okay. But you must try to do so in the right way. People are also more likely, I guess, to take on board the feedback that you're given if you do that anyway. And then the second round, the standards take away my rights to freedom of speech. Well, I think we've already discussed that freedom of speech is not an unlimited right in the UK. British law protects the right to freedom of expression, but it is subject to certain restrictions that are necessary in a democratic society. So for healthcare professionals, their standards place limits on our right to expression, where public safety and the reputation of our professions could be put at risk. And the third one then, if I post something about public health that goes against popular opinion, it could be seen as misinformation. Well, it would clearly be wrong to imply that everyone who expresses a view about public health which is contrary to mainstream opinion is always spreading misinformation. But it is, of course, important to be balanced in how we post, make clear when we're expressing an opinion, and where appropriate, we acknowledge what the opposing views might be as well. And then healthcare professionals should avoid using social media because the risks are just too great. Well, this webinar would have been a lot quicker if that was our line. How to use social media responsibly? Don't. Funny, I asked my school teacher husband this morning just what advice he would give about social media, and that's what he said, just don't do it. And that's not the line here. And I guess my husband was thinking about the reports of how endless scrolling can be dangerous or damages your attention span and literally reshapes our brains. So we maybe struggle to think a wee bit deeply. And he's aware just how it can create an addiction to entertainment, and habits we form online can actually shape our values and our behaviours offline. And I suppose he sees that in school and settings as well. So as professionals, I do think it is, of course, important that we do educate ourselves on these unseen influences of social media. But used in the right way, it provides many benefits, as we have discussed earlier. And in fact, there are also risks of healthcare professionals' voice not being heard in this space, of maybe not being able to help guide people through some of the conflicting and sometimes the harmful information that there is online. But of course, it's very much just about how we do it. So a few obvious statements up here, but just think about getting social media right. I think it's really a matter of having a clear purpose in mind for your posts. So consider, why are you making a statement? And is there any intent to harm or defame somebody in the process? And have you got a firm idea of who can see what you're sharing? And I think if you get those two things in place, you can easily see if what you're about to share is professional or is it crossing a line. I think we should assume that what you post could be shared and read by anyone, because privacy settings are no guarantee that something you post will not be publicly visible. Someone once said to me, would you be happy to see it on the side of a bus going through your local town? And don't post information that could identify a service user unless you have their permission. Don't post inappropriate or offensive material, even if you feel strongly that you are in the right of it. And take 5 and consider if what you're going to post is appropriate. Is it professional? Is it respectful? And then, of course, maintain appropriate professional boundaries as you're communicating with colleagues as well as service users and carers. And I know sometimes the situation can feel very urgent, and really, when we think about it, you very rarely need to react immediately. And if you're unsure of the wording or maybe the tone of what you're about to say, and just wait, run it past somebody. You're less likely to post something rash if you actually take the time to consider what is the best way to respond to this statement. Indeed, does it even warrant a response? I often say overlooking an offence demonstrates great wisdom and patience, and it can be a real virtue and a healthy response actually if we don't always see the need to respond. So it's back to using our professional judgment and just consider what our standards say. We'll come to the end of our session here today. Hopefully you have found maybe 1 or 2 things of interest, maybe perhaps learned something new about social media or the standards, and maybe just some ideas as to how we can continue to live out the standards in practice regarding social media. Maybe it's just been a reminder to you of things you already knew, or just reinforcing what you knew. So I think here are some key takeaways, certainly from me from this session. And maybe you can just take a moment now again to reflect on 1 or 2 key takeaways for you for yourself. And as I say, think about sharing this information with your colleagues if you have them at a later date, and explore these things in a bit more depth. And I'm going to share some resources that you could help you to do that. But just a few pointers there. Social media use brings many opportunities for healthcare professionals, including chances to develop and share skills and knowledge, supports networks, and it promotes public health, not to mention all the opportunities to promote a business or a service, and that's fine. The standards for conduct, performance and ethics make clear that our expectations of registrants whilst they are using social media. So it gives you enough freedom for you to decide how to apply them in your given context, but you need to be reflective. You need to be thinking about how you're applying them. And I think it's important to think before we post as well. So working out who might see what we share, and remembering that even the strictest privacy settings don't guarantee that posts couldn't be circulated much more widely. So back to the rating your knowledge and understanding of the webinar. If you would like to do that again for me, that would be really helpful for us. And I'll give you just a moment to do that. And as I say, I'm going to show you some resources now for further information. If you need a bit more information, if you need more clarity on anything, you may find it in these resources that are coming up. But as I say, do please fill in our survey at the end. We'd love everybody to do that. We read every comment that we get through in our surveys. And if there are any outstanding questions for you, please put them in, and then we'll be sure to include those in any future events that we're doing on this topic. So I'm just going to give you a moment just for a few more. And I mean, I think it looks good. There's a lot higher scores there coming through. So that's really helpful, and that's encouraging. Thank you very much for voting on that there. That's super. Thank you. So let's look at some resources then that you can use and check out later. You can see these ones. Those QR codes will take you straight to some of our other resources there on our website. Particularly there's one guidance on the use of social media, which might be very helpful, and the social media case studies again. You could use those, or you could use the case studies that you've just seen, because you'll be getting a copy of the slides there as well. And here you can see some of the key resources that we have to help you with your CPD. Now, these are all on our website as well, and you will receive the links to these in that follow-up email that we talked about, or you can just browse the CPD section of our website as well. Don't forget as well your professional body, because they can be a really invaluable source of advice and resources. If you're not sure who your professional body is, again, we have a list of professional bodies on our website. Just search for HCPC professional bodies and you'll see them. They do produce material, obviously it's more specific to your profession, and again can provide some great recommendations. So we would suggest that you check them out as well. And there's just a few next steps for you. So we do recommend take some time to reflect on your learning from this session. Accurate self-reflection, very important. Think about the posts that you've been putting on, maybe historical ones, thinking about future ones. Get involved in some of our other CPD week activities. Have a look and see what other ones we'll be talking about. And then here's that QR code for that survey that I was talking about. So thank you so much for coming along today, for taking the time. It's great to have lots of people there. I'm not just talking to myself. Fill out the evaluation form. It's only, I think, 6 questions. It'll not take it any more than 2 minutes at most. But as I say, the feedback we do use whenever we're doing subsequent sessions. And hopefully that QR code will take you straight there. I'll leave it up on the screen here just for now, for a while, so as you can do that. And don't forget to look out for the link and the follow-up email that you'll get there. So goodbye from me, and we enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you at another event soon. Thank you very much.